Hey everyone, welcome back to Should I Play? Today we are checking out Monster Train, developed by Shiny Shoe and published by Good Shepherd Entertainment. As of writing this, it came out a couple of days ago, but if you're in the future, Monster Train was released on May 21st, 2020. Monster Train is a roguelite deck builder. Your objective is to travel by track to the ends of the world, or in this case, hell. Losing is quite possible here on this Polar Express, having to protect a fire, or as Monster Train refers to it as, a pyre. You have 3 ascending floors the enemies have to travel before reaching your pyre. To stop them, you fill up your carts with monsters or cast spells. If you can't halt the enemy's advance, your pyre will fight till its last flame. But is Monster Train a train wreck or a golden ticket waiting to cash out? Find that out and more on this episode of Should I Play? The story for Monster Train is a bit loose. Being a short roguelite, it essentially boils down to you riding on a train towards hell. But as you progress, more and more powerful beings try to stop you. You, the player, aren't on some holy crusade. You actually play as the evil guys this time around, which is why trying to get to hell is a good thing in this case. As you progress down the tracks, you start fighting off normal humans, but eventually fighting off against angels who can't even fit in one of your carts. That being said, the game starts off nice and simple. There are 5 factions in total for you to play as. You get to pick a main faction, which determines your champion, which is a special unit that gets upgraded as you progress. And you also get to pick a sub-faction that you can get cards from or units depending on your choices in the game. At the start, you only have access to 2 factions, the Hellhorn, a super aggressive high damage, low HP faction with burn and armor spells primarily, and the Awoken, a more defensive high HP, low damage faction with spells mostly focused around healing. All the factions work well with each other, and it's awesome how different each faction is. The style completely changes when you pick a different primary faction, and I just can't get enough of it. Once you have decided on your faction, the game actually begins. Once the game begins, you will be on a single lane where you will get your first upgrade for your champion, and maybe some other upgrades depending on the randomness that's going on right now. After you begin the first battle, the game starts off nice and simple, but Monster Train also adds a fun gambling mechanic. Before the combat, you can accept to give the enemies a random buff depending on what their leader has. The reward for accepting this can either be a relic, gold, or unit draft, all of which can be really helpful in the early game. The reward is also never hidden, and is nicely displayed for you before you accept or decline the challenge. Once you get into battle, you will have a view of 4 floors. 3 floors for your minions and enemies to walk up, and the top floor which houses your pyre, or is your life total. Battle begins and you draw your opening hand. You will always have your champion in it, and your champion will always cost 0 mana, so you will never not have a creature at the start of the battle. Now, the game begins in full tactical mode. This system is really fun. It's a mix between playing units so you can attack the enemy and lower their health, and just playing spells. At the beginning, you only have access to 3 mana per turn, so choose wisely. The amount of units per floor is dependent on the lights in the upper left side of the floor. Each creature takes up a certain amount of space, so you can't just super stack a floor unless you have a card that allows your creature to ascend or descend floors. Monster Train does something so awesome before you end your turn. It calculates for you how much damage you and the enemy will take and display it by your health pool, so you don't have to count every little bit of damage if your monster is living or dying. Such a great addition. Without it, Monster Train would slow down so much and it would be so repetitive. Once you end your turn, combat ensues. Unless you have a special skill that allows your monster to attack first, the enemies will always attack first. Every combat encounter has a boss fight at the end. The first few floor bosses are hardly anything to write home about. Their HP bars are pretty small and you could beat them in the first few rooms, but eventually they get over 1,000 hit points. And something that really irks me a bit is the lack of variety of bosses. the same ones always pop up and generally do the same things too. Besides something very minor, the last 2 bosses in the game change up a bit. Besides that, it's the same old for every run. After you finish the combat, you will usually gain 2 spells of your choice. They'll be in a random format of 3 cards. One from your main faction and another one from your secondary, so you have the option to add 2 after every combat. After that, you return to the main map with your train and you get your first actual choice of where you go. Do you go left or do you go right on the tracks? For the most part, at the start, you get the choice between units from one of your 2 factions of choice and other benefits depending on the run. It can be a shop, a heal for your pyre, or other rewards. You gain all the rewards down the track you pick, so you don't have to go for one specific reward. There may even be a shop down the track that you chose. Shops in Monster Train can give you a great boon for either spells or your creatures, because as the game goes on and gets more challenging, the best way to scale up your favorite monsters is to buy keystones from the shops. By default, creatures and spells only have 2 slots for keystones, and they can do anything from increased damage, health, letting you attack first, or even attacking twice in one round. Plus, it gives you something to spend your money on. Finally, on the overworld, there are events that, for the most part, only give you boons. Without locking you into a choice, you could just leave at any time if you don't want the reward. So, they really can't hurt your runs. It sucks when you have to cross your fingers every time you encounter a random event in a roguelike that just destroys your run, so I'm really glad Monster Train diverted from that train of thought. Another way to increase your power in Monster Train is through advancements. After every 3rd fight, you will be fighting a bigger boss, one that is larger than your train floors usually. It swoops from floor to floor, buffing its minions or debuffing yours, until it's ready to climb your train too. Completing one of these fights rewards you with your choice of extra mana, more space per floor, or an extra card drawn each turn. I've been having way too much success with more space that I hardly pick any of the others. It's almost insane. That insanity is fine because the average length for a run of Monster Train is only from 25 minutes to an hour, which is the perfect amount of time to spend on a roguelite in my opinion. But the runs do end up feeling so samey. Even after beating it a couple of times and increasing your Covenant, which is a mode that this game includes that increases your difficulty as you beat the run. It's something similar to another game, Slay the Spire's Ascension mode. Some last notes that I want to add about the game. The art style for this game is really awesome. The monsters look badass. There are some sick music tracks that I unfortunately cannot play during this video, but you should totally check out the soundtrack for this game. After your run is completed, you gain XP for your 2 factions, which unlock more cards, monsters, and relics for future runs, which add even more replayability and difference to the runs, but I always find myself leaning towards one unit or a couple of units just because they just have so much more power than the others in my opinion. So should you play Monster Train? I say absolutely give it a go, but after the 15 hours of playing, I'm kind of burnt out of the game. It feels too samey to me. It might be because I played those 15 hours over the course of 2 days, and after a couple of days, I can definitely see myself going back and enjoying it just as much as the first time playing. I will also note, the game is a bit easier than other roguelites, which can be taken as a good thing or a bad thing depending on your playstyle. If you want something much harder that is very similar to this game, I would recommend Slay the Spire as I mentioned earlier. But it's just more challenging, both games are great in their own way. That's all from me for this video. If you made it this far in the video, you should totally click the subscribe button. And if for some reason you didn't like it but made it here, tell me in the comment section so I can improve in the future. Have a great day, everyone. Peace!